is the Executive Director of the Color of Change PAC. It's your full title. We also have Guy Cecil with Priorities USA. And we have Houston's new district attorney, Kim Ah. And JoCasta Zamarripa, who is our state representative from Milwaukee. So guys, we are here to talk about the shifting trends in America. You know, so much is happening. So much is happening. And I want to start off the conversation sharing a note of inspiration that something that came up for me about, I don't know, several months ago, like May, maybe? I went to a DNC event and Joe Biden was speaking at it. And he started to talk about, you know, we were all still very, very wounded then, I think. And he was trying to incite us to be somewhat inspired about the fact that, like, yes, we thought we had all this progress over 8 years. And I know we feel like we've had a big setback, but like, we need to figure this out. And he said, one of the things that maybe we're missing is that because our movements around equality and the people who care deeply about justice, inclusion, because we all have a lot of different issues that come to the forefront, maybe we're missing an opportunity to just have one big, bold, visionary idea that we can all galvanize around, that can then create some unity and also some enthusiasm about the possibilities of the world. And the example that he used is he said, you know, what he actually said, because this is Uncle Joe, he said, you know, nobody's excited about what we're saying because we're not saying anything big. Remember when we were challenged to go to the moon? Remember how ridiculous and audacious that sounded? We're going to the moon. But Americans got excited and had what my MBA hat calls a stretch goal, right? And so I just want to start off with some big highbrow picture thinking and invite our panelists to just share with us, you know, as operatives, which we all are in our own ways, we get caught in the mundane, day-to-day, like very, very, very minute detail of how do we organize. And I would just love to give you each a moment to share with us kind of from your heart. Today in 2017, going into 2018, if you could share with us your vision, more big picture for how we move forward, what would that be? What would that look like? I'm gonna start at the end with JoCasta.
Oh, Aisha, don't leave us. Well, I'm State Representative Zamarripa. Thank you, Aisha, for letting me kick it off. But my vision for moving on from here is, you know, right now I'm trying to persevere and persist like we all are. And it has been very difficult ever since the fall elections. And so I continue, you know, I just had my last fundraiser of the year last week. And some of my supporters wanted me to make sure that I inspire them because they're feeling very downtrodden. And so what I told them was that what keeps me going is that I am an LGBT woman of color, and I know that my communities have a seat at the table because I'm there. Difficult as it is right now. And honestly, sometimes I feel like I want to take my ball and go home these days. But I know that I represent the largest Latino community in the great state of Wisconsin. I'm the first Latino woman elected to the state legislature in our very state. And I'm an openly bisexual woman. I know I have to be at the table for those communities. And that's what keeps me going, honestly. I don't know how and it's come up, I appreciate Congressman Takano's remarks. It's come up time and time again around our allies, our good, straight, white progressives. I don't know how they're doing it, because what keeps me going, honestly, is knowing that I represent for these underrepresented communities, and I gotta get up in the morning and get to that table, because if I'm not there, who will be the voice for those folks that haven't had that voice in government like they need and deserve to have?
Equality under the law. I'm very optimistic about these times. By implementing good policies from executive branch positions, such as district attorney, we can make changes immediately in the criminal justice reform movement, which is, to me, ground zero for social justice reform. And so in Houston, Harris County, our minority communities, who together comprise the majority of the most diverse city in America, are coming together. And we recently, in 2016, turned our county blue in Texas for the first time in almost 30 years. And we led the ticket with a big picture message of criminal justice reform. Stop arresting people for low-level crimes like misdemeanor possession of marijuana, and test the rape kits that sat on the shelves of our city for 8 years. Go after crimes against people. So I think we touched people where they lived. Parents are afraid of their children having records for small transgressions against the law. We didn't change the law. I just used my authority and discretion under the law to redeploy our resources, and it was popular and people related to it. And when it came to serious crimes against people, we all agree that rape and robbery and murder are things that should take a priority stance. They are bipartisan issues, they are non-political issues, but they require the trust of the community to report the crimes, to testify as witnesses, and with the attacks that we've seen in the law from the legislative branch on our immigration laws, we see a huge, a growing resistance and fear, even in well-to-do immigrant communities, in educated communities, in communities where many people are documented and legal and lawful. And so it's important that through equality under the law, prosecution of hate crimes, welcoming of victims and others to report without fear of deportation, that we will increase the trust of the average voter in the justice system, who, if they fail to believe in the law in our country, will never vote.
I think we all come to this through our own personal perspective. For me, my grandmother married into a horribly abusive situation. Her husband, on his first violent attempt, stabbed her 12 times with a butcher knife, got 3 months in prison. On his second attempt, tried to shoot her, and the gun jammed, and so he pistol whipped her, got 6 months. And went into hiding with my 3-year-old mom and her 4 brothers and sisters. And when my grandfather got out of jail, found my grandmother and shot her 3 times. She survived all 3, decided she had enough, packed her 5 kids into a station wagon and drove from Columbus, Ohio to Miami, Florida. Raised 5 kids in duplexes and single-wide trailers as a single mom. Was held hostage by a tipped wage system that discriminates against employees who walk up and down concrete floors to serve our food. My parents did marginally better than my grandmother until my youngest brother was born and at 2 months diagnosed with stage 4 neuroblastoma. My parents, with no money in the bank, had to deal with what the doctors described as the likely death of their youngest child. And a week later, the health insurance company canceled our insurance because my brother had a pre-existing condition in the womb. The good part of the story is my brother is 37 and has 2 beautiful kids. But it sent my parents into 2 decades of living in poverty. Not euphemistically paycheck to paycheck, but poverty. And so we ended up back in a single-wide trailer in a subsidized home on the grounds of a Little League baseball team. And in exchange for the free trailer, my dad would come home after work and he would mow the field and clean the toilets and open the concession stand. I did economically better than my parents. But my parents never worried about holding the hand of the person they love when they were walking down the street. My parents never left their first job because they knew they would be fired if they came out. My husband and I have 7 nieces and nephews, 2 of whom are black. We love all of our nieces and nephews exactly the same. But we worry about Jalen and Travis in a way that is fundamentally different than our 5 white nieces and nephews. So my big vision of what it means to be a progressive, and in my case, a Democrat, is a party that is big enough and broad enough that we can care about the working class waitress who's struggling to raise 5 kids on her own, regardless of her race. That we can care about the child who now relies on the CHIP program, which is being delayed and potentially gutted by an uncaring conservative music movement that claims to have a ideologically based on a loving God. We can care about the gay man who still struggles, or the lesbian, or the transgender service member, or the bisexual, a woman who is serving in the state legislature, which is awesome to hear. And we can care about the young black child and believe that they should be growing up in a place where they are afforded every opportunity that I was, even as a poor person, because there was privilege from the fact that I am white. We all enter life with headwinds and tailwinds. We should be doing everything we can to reduce the headwinds and everything we can to improve the tailwinds so that everybody has a chance to succeed and live up to the potential that God imagines for them in their own life.
I imagine a world where elected officials, where institutions, where corporate heads go to sleep at night worried, restless about disappointing black people. That's what I work for every single day. I imagine a world where we don't think about black voter participation during 2008 as the high water mark of black voter participation. I imagine a world in which black voters who have been made ineligible to vote, or black voters who have chosen not to vote, who are completely disenchanted with the political process, begin to understand their power. That's what I want black people to go to sleep with. Understanding that it's not always about who's running for president, but understanding that there are local folks, prosecutors like Kim, who are making daily decisions that impact the lives of their families, their communities, their own selves. And so that's what I dream of, is a world in which black people are situated in their power and that we have options to go and vote for. One of the things that I've learned in leading color of Change PAC, and we're really focused on returning our energy local, and thinking about the ways in which we can change those that profit from an incarceration system that has made billions and billions of dollars off the backs of black bodies. And so we think about that every day. One of the things I've learned is that 90% of prosecutors run completely unopposed. 95% are white men. And so I imagine a world in which we have elected officials that are reflective of our community, but also reflective of the values of our community. And so that's what I'm working toward. That's what I'm dreaming about.
Well, these answers are inspiring. I hope you all are inspired. I am too. I'll try to keep it short so we can talk about other things as well. But, you know, I would just say that the challenges that we face together are bigger than one person or one party. I, of course, am here representing the Democrats, and what we're fighting for, and when we think about a 30,000-foot view, it's opportunity for everyone and justice for all. That's how I'd summarize it. You can talk about healthcare, you can talk about education, you can talk about criminal justice reform, you can talk about whether or not you can afford to go to college, if healthcare is going to bankrupt you, any of those things. Opportunity for everyone. We are up against right now a Republican Party that wants to roll back the clocks on any of the progress that we've made. And we can talk all afternoon about that. But Democrats are out there fighting for opportunity for everyone, justice for all. And that's the work that you're going to see. And I think it fits with all of the stories that we hear. We all bring a personal story that puts us in this room together right at this moment, at this time in history. And this is no longer about right versus left. This is about right versus wrong. That's where we are right now. So that's the work that we have ahead, and I'm excited to work with all of you on that.
Thank you. So I am just so moved and inspired, and always am, frankly, when I'm listening to progressive people talk about their values and the work they're doing in the world. But we know it doesn't always play out so seamlessly.
Since Ferguson and before that, we've been contemplating and thinking about how we take power back for our community. And as we watch sort of like the police violence unfold, we watch the movement for Black lives grow, the level of consciousness and the level of education that's happening not only in our country but worldwide. We wanted to begin to shift the conversation. Yes, police violence is bad, it's awful, it's horrible. Seeing these videos every week is triggering and traumatizing, but it's a symptom. It's a symptom of the flu, it's a symptom of the cancer. The cancer is that our communities are over-policed and over-incarcerated. And so we were watching folks, we couldn't get folks to charge police officers, we couldn't get folks to stop charging folks for low-level offenses, and more as we thought about who's the power, where's the power, we landed on the prosecutor. Every single day they're making daily decisions about whether to charge, whether to request bail, whether this is a felony or a misdemeanor, everyday things that impact our lives and the lives of our families. And so that's why prosecutors became important to us. And so we started looking around the country for prosecutors who weren't attempting to profit from this tough on crime rhetoric, who weren't attempting to get into office and profit from tough on crime policies. And so we began looking for a set of district attorneys that we felt share our values. Beggars can't be choosers, so they couldn't all be Black folks. Oh, that would be nice. Or they couldn't all be LGBTQ folks. And so we started with, we're looking for folks that share our values. And we came across folks like Kim, who I didn't even know was a part of the community until like after we were already texting voters saying, go vote for Kim. And I was like, yes, bonus point. And so we went around and we created a national Black battleground state program. And we said to folks, whether you're in California or New York, maybe your national election doesn't count, maybe you don't have a contested prosecutor election on the ballot, but there are our people in the most over-incarcerated cities and counties in the country who actually have a choice right now. We need you to help contact them. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build a Black volunteer grassroots movement that's empowered and centers empowering Black joy. And through doing that, we're going to talk to Black folks about some of the local elected officials who we believe that we can back. If we back, that they will actually be accountable to our communities. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to be perfect. But what we're looking for and what we're trying to encourage is a full cycle of accountability. And so we're happy to see folks like Kim, who are fighting the good fight in office. We saw an article the other day that disturbed us, and our staff called her up and said, hey, what's going on? And she got on the phone and talked us through it. And I think that's what we're trying to see. We're trying to see folks who will actually hop on the phone when we have a concern and tell us what's going on so that we can inform our members.
So one of you, thank you, and I'd like to just lift up those affirming stories because we need to walk out of here remembering that there are best practices of how we come together even though things are shifting and changing and people have low anxiety around it. Someone mentioned, I don't remember if it was Jess, something about having shared values, right? And this idea of kind of power and how do we actually kind of come around and get to that. And I want to pivot a little bit because this thing of values comes up for me a lot because I see that our value system in the political discourse seems to be eroding with the Trump tweets and the Trump rhetoric and the alternative facts and the bold-faced lies and the grab 'em by the and on and on and on and on and on. And I wonder, in this shifting America, which to me is a really negative shift that I don't know how we immediately combat, how do you all think that we try to get ahead of that derailing? It's a shift, but I think it's a derailing. How are you in your work trying to get ahead of that and push back against some of that move towards ignorance being really the foundation for how we do politics and business?
Well, I think that we've seen Americans stand up the day after Donald Trump was elected. I think we saw particularly the Women's March that galvanized not only millions of women all over the country, but men too, to march in protest. We saw thousands of people make calls and knock doors all over the country in unity around healthcare to save healthcare for 30 million Americans. So many people called Congress, they broke the phone switchboards there. It hasn't stopped. I think, these are difficult times to be sure, but the way that Americans are standing up, making their voices heard and fighting back is exactly what we would want in the ways that we need to defend democracy right now. And I'm really proud of the country in the way that we are organizing and working with groups. And let me just say this, Democrats have won 100 races since Donald Trump was elected. 100 races. 33 of them were flips from red to blue, and most of them were in districts that Donald Trump won by double digits in 2016. So people are fighting back not only by marching, by making phone calls, by coming together, all of the groups forming. Don't believe that there is disunity around our values. There is tremendous unity. In Virginia alone, over 30 to 40 groups worked together to elect Ralph Northam, Justin Fairfax, Mark Herring, 15 new women to the state delegate races, or to the House and to the Senate. This is unity. These are people coming together in values. And I think this is important to remember. If you want to leave here feeling hopeful that we have a roadmap and a plan, we do. Because we do know what we stand for. We do know what we're up against. But we also have a roadmap to win. And when we come together in unity, we are doing that. It's been a good 2017 in terms of electoral politics. We have a roadmap for 2018, and we're going to continue doing that work.
JoCasta, in Wisconsin, more money is being spent. You're talking about a values game. More money is being spent to attack our values by way of attacking our Senator, Tammy Baldwin, on her than any other Senate race in the country right now. And that is a state that is changing, and that some of this rhetoric and this vitriol and this kind of diversion towards the nasty values is happening. What's happening there on the ground? What is your take on how we fight back and push back and win against that?
Yes, thank you, Aisha. Right, we see the attack ads against Senator Baldwin. They're certainly going after her, and I know a lot of us heard Senator Baldwin speak yesterday, and in particular when she spoke to the electeds in the morning, she indicated that they're spending a tremendous amount, more so than on any other Senate Dem, but they're staying away from attacking her sexual identity, and that's interesting. It shows that we've come a long way, and that folks don't want to be outwardly homophobic, but nevertheless they're spending more money attacking her than any other Democrat. So I think that's very telling, and I think that on the ground in Wisconsin, it's difficult. I was happy when you asked me to be on this panel because the truth is that our minority populations are the fastest growing demographics in the great state of Wisconsin, but we're still almost 90%, probably 85% white, and we're an aging population. But we have this influx, in particular, of Latino Wisconsinites and immigrant Wisconsinites that are very young. In fact, Latinos in Wisconsin are younger than the national average, with 4 in 10 of us being under the age of 30. And so we absolutely are the future of the state of Wisconsin. And I think there's this culture shock for a lot of Wisconsinites who are trying to get used to this new incoming community. But what we have to understand is that we bring with us a workforce, we bring with us our young families, and it should be seen as a positive. And unfortunately, again, we're seeing this clash, and we saw President Trump win Wisconsin in November, unfortunately. And it's why more than ever, we need to make sure that we're getting our constituency, in particular our underrepresented folks, our people of color, our LGBT folks, our young voters to the polls on election day. Because even though we're the fastest growing demographic in the state, Latinos in Wisconsin, unfortunately, still report some of the lowest, if not the lowest, voter turnout in Wisconsin. And that's when we're going to see victories, when we get that fast-growing demographic. They got the right to vote. Got to get to the polls on election day, on every election day.
Guy, talk to us about how we do that, right? So with these shifting demographics, there's a generational divide, right, in terms of getting a hold of youth. There's also, cultural divides, etc. And one, something came up for me yesterday when Danica Rome was speaking, and she always takes off her shoe and shows us that the way that she won that race was retail politics and back to basics of door knocking and pound the pavement and walking holes in her shoes. But I know that you are on the cutting edge of digital program, technology, thinking about how we reach constituencies in different places or through different ways, especially when we're trying to access folks who don't always access the ballot. So share with us, in this changing demographic, when we're trying to get our arms around new groups of people, what are some of the innovative ways that we're attempting to do that?
First of all, you could say Wisconsin. I just love hearing it over and over again. It's like the best accent in the world.
I have to shout out Elliot.
I love it. I think it's just awesome.
From Wisconsin too, because I just laugh at his Wisconsin.
I want to piggyback off something you said as a transition to your question, which is, we've heard a lot about binary choices. And I think this is a group in particular that maybe understands that not everything is a binary choice. We need to win in Wisconsin. We need to win in Ohio. We need to win in states that have a less than national average level of diversity. We also have to commit new resources to places like Georgia and Arizona, which have not only a growing diversity, but a large diversity as we walk into 2018 elections. And I think, I get asked a lot, should we focus on state legislative races, or should we focus on the DAs, or should we focus on the Congress, or should we focus on the Senate, or governors? Should we focus on the new emerging majorities, or should we focus on white voters that might be with us if we talk to them? And the answer is yes. I'm sorry, we don't have the luxury. But how do we change ignorance? Well, we win. I think that, honestly, the patient is in the ER. We got to get the patient to the ICU. 2018 gets the patient to the ICU. Then we got to get the patient back on the road to recovery. And that's what's going to happen in 2020. But I think the number one thing is we have to understand that one of our jobs is to meet voters where they are and not just convince them that we're right on everything, which I know a lot of us progressives really like to do. And this is where the right is different than the left. The goal of the right is to move the country ideologically over time. And so the Kochs and the Mercers spend hundreds of millions of dollars online, 365 days a year. And their goal is to take whatever bias you have. We all have good biases and we have bad biases, and their goal is to take what bias you have and to use that to move you ideologically, regardless of who the candidate is on their side. And they do this every day online. Our side, God love us, we really want to prove that our issue is the most important and that we are right, and if only you would agree with us on this, then everything would be right. And I think we have to allow some flexibility. My only question right now in 2018 is, what do I need to say to the gettable voters out there, whether they are black, whether they are Latino, whether they are Asian, gay, straight, Christian, Jewish, Muslim? What do I need to say to you as the individual voter to move you ideologically and to vote for us in 2018? Not, what is the issue that I care about the most, and how do I convince you that is the most important issue, and how do I get you then to vote on that? Number two, we have to change where we communicate with people. 2016, House Republicans spent 28% of every paid media dollar online. House Democrats spent 4% of every paid media dollar online. Despite the fact that Hillary Clinton significantly outraised Donald Trump outspent Hillary Clinton online. Senate Democrats outraised Senate Republicans. Senate Republicans outspent Senate Democrats by $20 million. So if we are a party that cares about the new emerging majority and young people, by the way, the fastest growing use of mobile are Latinos, then we need to adjust not just what we're saying, we also need to adjust where we're saying it. And so the second thing I would say is we must fundamentally change the way that we communicate from a TV-first operation to an operation that uses television, but also uses the other tools at our disposal. I mean, this is something that Priorities has a new relationship with Color of Change, and part of it was because we saw what they were doing and how they were motivating and activating people, and we were excited about the fact that they want to take that activation and move it into electoral power. And the last thing I would say is, for those of us that I think would be described as establishment, I'm only going to put myself in that box, I won't include anybody else. It's important for us to get the hell out of our own boxes and our own lanes and actually talk to other people that are out there and engaged in communities and fighting at the ground level. And we're not always perfect at doing that, but I think for us as an organization, it's something that we are committed to doing. Yes, it's the right thing to do, but we're also frankly doing it because we want to win, and we think reclaiming power requires us to do that.
Thank you. So one of the things that comes up to me all the time is we got to meet people where they are through the tools that they use, but we also need to talk to them about things that matter to their day-to-day lives and experience, right? And this is what's so fascinating to me about the way that you talk about your work, District Attorney Young, and talking about criminal justice reform as central and really a core value that we need to embrace in transforming America, and that being galvanizing. So I would love for you to say a little bit more about how in your campaign generally you were able to bring so many people together across Houston around really something that's value-centric, and how your messaging experience, and certainly like the core of the work, were so integrated that people found it to be authentic and got engaged.
Thank you. I ran twice in 2014 and 2016 because our elected DA had passed away in office. And I ran in 14 knowing I would lose in all likelihood because Democrats had lost for the last 37 years. But I knew that 2016 looked better. And I felt like if we gave people a message, if there was some value that we could center their efforts around, that it would motivate them and give them hope to go to the polls, that they would see the results of the polls. And so in 14, we faced some issues, really inter-party issues surrounding what our message was locally and statewide. And I found simple things that touched people where they were. I'm an optimist in terms of the human spirit. But sometimes before you can get people to shared values, you have to remind them of their shared negative experiences. So who knows more about being marginalized in the world than the LGBTQ community, or the African American community, or the Latina community? All of us, in truth, everyone at some point, including white male Republicans, have felt disenfranchised or somehow marginalized. You hear them talk about it. In fact, that's who elected Donald Trump. And so this negative appeal about, who we can't be or what we can't do, to me, gives us the opportunity, when we have the right message, to turn the tables. Now, the right message, just like you were saying, Cecil, can't be, trust us, we're right. We got to have evidence. And that's why I believe that the Victory Fund, when you support candidates, our job is not just to get elected. Our job is to govern well when we get elected. Our job is to come through with the campaign promises that we told the public we stood for. And so That's why on day 47, when we stopped arresting people with the full support of law enforcement in the third biggest county in the country, and we stopped arresting them for misdemeanor marijuana and putting our focus instead on rape victims and on how we treat those who have been domestically abused and the survivors out there, we struck a chord. People cared about that. They were fearful for their children's lost opportunities if they were given criminal records, but they were fearful of their mothers or sisters or wives or girlfriends' attacks. And so we gave people, I think, something to believe in, saying we're going to change the priority. And we also have to reframe our issues. Prosecutors for years have talked about tough on crime. We've got scalps on our belt. We've got X number of arrests, X number of convictions, without anybody in the public holding us accountable as to whether or not that really made people safer. Because at the core of democracy, we've got to have order in society. We give our government power and our police and prosecutors power to protect us. So if they're persecuting us, what's wrong here? Well, we've got to reframe the public safety question and how policing can make us safer and how use of our discretion as prosecutors can make us safer and give people, I think, the evidence to show we've made you safer by applying the law equally to all victims, by welcoming people of color, by listening to the diverse voices of Black Lives Matter and other genuine civil rights movements, by saying we hear you. And in fact, you, the public, you, the jurors, the voters, you're the ones who ultimately make the decision. We bring you the case. You set the price on bad behavior of police officers or bad behavior of people. So I think we have to reframe these issues. I think we have to have a strong message. I think the Democrats have to continue to seek out support in red states where we've got lots of blue voters. We find the suburbs to be a hardy place to retain votes because our inner cities now are as diverse. They are not totally minority anymore. They are as diverse party-wide as the suburbs. So when we moved our message out and talked to women during my campaign about victimization and about alternative options for their kids should they get in trouble, that rang a bell for people. And I think that's what galvanized them to move. And one last thing. When Donald Trump talks about, when we hear the divisive language that's being used, I think there's nothing more compelling than reminding people in a gentle or some way that they have been marginalized before, that they felt uncomfortable in a room before, and the discrimination when it came against them was something that they felt somebody should stand up and fight for. And I think when you appeal to people where they live, they're more willing to stand up for us. And so when I was not outed, I'd been with my partner for 32 years, but when my opponent, at the end of her campaign, trotted out the fact that I was a lesbian and that somehow this should matter to voters, even Republicans rejected that. And we drew from their middle ground in support and dragged our whole ticket across the line in Houston. So I hope we focus in urban areas, not to give up on rural areas. They're so important. But in our urban areas, we see a lot of change happening. Our world is changing like that. And if our response as elected officials doesn't change with it, if we hold on to the status quo and the old way we judged and tried to prove things, we're going to keep losing. And I don't think we have to do that. I think we can win, and this is a time for optimism and hope.
I know we have to wrap up, but I know you wanted to jump in there.
Well, I just wanted to address some of this because I couldn't agree more. And one of the first things that Chairman Perez did when he became the chair of the Democratic Party at such an interesting and challenging time is to just entirely change the mission of the DNC. You know, historically it's existed to help elect a Democratic president. That's incredibly important. But when you look at the last 8 years and you look and see the Democrats have lost over 1,000 seats throughout this country, we got to do something different. So the very first thing we did was change the mission. We are now working to elect Democrats from the school board all the way up to the Oval Office. And that's what you see in our work and our investments. That's right. And so we are paying attention to rural areas. areas. And in fact, we launched a program. How many of you remember Howard Dean's 50-state strategy? Yeah, a lot of hands, right? It was a good one. And we've got to get back to basics and back to organizing. We've launched a program called Every Zip Code Counts. We've increased funding by 33% out to all of the state parties to help candidates, to work with groups, to build collaboration, to be in unity around our shared values, around the fights ahead. We have to be more innovative. We're offering a $10 million grant program to our state parties to come with new ideas. How do we re-engage and inspire our base? How do we work with others? How do we have conversations in rural communities? How do we make, half the battle is we stop talking to folks. We've got to make sure that we're talking to them now, every single day, not just 2 weeks before an election. That's insulting to folks. So we have been out there organizing since the summer. We talked to over 1 million people just in the summer alone, around Resistance Summer, around organizing for healthcare, organizing back to basics, having conversations, partnering with groups that are on the ground, listening to folks in every single zip code. And the third thing we have to do is modernize. We have to modernize our party. Guy is exactly right. The Democratic Party has got to catch up and move ahead very quickly. The Republicans spent $175 million on data and technology alone over the last 3 years, and it made a difference. We have to make meaningful investments so that we can have meaningful conversations and meet people where they are. And we need to focus on winning. The way that we will change this country is by electing more Democrats who share our values, more progressives who share our values, who will fight for us, who will stand up and fight for us. I got started in politics and in advocacy in Colorado with the Colorado AIDS Project. I grew up at a time where we had a Republican president who wouldn't even mention the word HIV or AIDS for years, and in fact had an administration that laughed at it while people died. That's how I came up and came into this work. And then the very first campaign I ever worked on was in Colorado against a woman who thought nothing was more important than preventing gay people from getting married. Here's the thing, because of all of the hard work, because of the unity, because we elect Democrats, because of our persistence, I married my partner Holly last year in my former opponent's home state of Colorado. We can do this. We have to get back to work, pick ourselves up, get out there, organize, have conversations, and we can win.
All right. Well, thank you so much to Jess O'Connell, to Arisha Hatch, to JoCasta Zamarripa, to the DA, and of course to Guy Cecil, who thank you very much for being our lone gentleman, which I didn't realize is here on the panel.
Lucky me.
We could talk for days, but we appreciate you coming and joining us and sharing all of your insights and work. Thanks.